Picture the most successful person you know, the one who commands every room they enter, who makes bold decisions without hesitation, who climbs every ladder they encounter with almost supernatural confidence. Now, what if I told you that the exact same psychological traits that make them so magnetically successful are identical to the traits we find in history's most dangerous people? This isn't about good people versus bad people. This isn't about heroes and villains. This is about a fundamental truth that will shatter everything you think you know about human nature, success, and the shadow that lives inside us all. By the end of this journey, you'll see that successful leader completely differently. You'll understand not just what made them rise to the top, but what it cost everyone else. And most unsettling of all, you'll recognize the same patterns in yourself. This story begins in 2002, when two psychologists made a discovery that would change psychology forever. The year was 2002. While the world was obsessing over corporate scandals and charismatic leaders gone wrong, two psychologists at the University of British Columbia were about to crack a code that had been hiding in plain sight for centuries. Delroy Paulhus and Kevin Williams weren't looking for villains. They were studying personality, those invisible forces that make you, you. But what they discovered would fundamentally change how we understand power, success, and the very people we choose to follow. Picture this. You're analyzing thousands of personality assessments, looking for patterns. Suddenly you notice something unsettling. 3 supposedly different traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy keep appearing together. Not sometimes, always. It's like discovering that lightning, thunder, and rain aren't separate weather events. They're all part of the same storm system. Paulus called it the Dark Triad, all 3 faces of the same psychological shadow. And here's what made their discovery so disturbing. These weren't rare clinical conditions locked away in textbooks. These were traits flourishing in boardrooms, political offices, and yes, maybe even in your own social circle. Think about the most successful person you know, the one who always seems to land on top, who commands rooms effortlessly, who gets what they want. Now ask yourself this: what if their success isn't despite having something dark inside them, but because of it? See, Paulhus and Williams didn't just identify a pattern. They uncovered a paradox that's been haunting humanity since we first formed societies. They proved that the very traits we fear in dangerous people are often identical to the traits we celebrate in successful ones. The question that kept them awake at night, the same one that's about to change how you see everyone around you, was this: if these dark traits are so destructive, why are they so incredibly ineffective? Their research opened a door we can never close. Once you see this pattern, you'll recognize it everywhere. In your boss, in your relationships, in history's greatest leaders. And most unsettling of all, you might just recognize it in yourself. Now that you know the pattern exists, let me show you exactly what Paulhus discovered lurking beneath the surface of human nature. 3 traits, 3 masks, 1 devastating core. First, narcissism. But forget everything you think you know about selfie-obsessed millennials. We're talking about grandiosity so profound it rewrites reality. These individuals don't just think they're special, they know it. They need constant admiration, like you need oxygen, and they'll manipulate entire rooms to get it. Picture that colleague who somehow makes every meeting about them, who takes credit for your ideas while genuinely believing they thought of them first. That's not arrogance. That's a fundamentally different relationship with reality itself. Second, Machiavellianism. Named after the man who wrote the playbook on strategic manipulation 5 centuries ago. These are the chess masters of human relationships, except the pieces are people, and the game never ends. They don't see you as a person with feelings and dreams. You're a resource to be optimized, a variable in their equation for success. They're indifferent to morality because morality is just another tool to manipulate. When a Machiavellian says, "I'm doing this for your own good," they're not lying. They genuinely believe you're good, and their good are the same thing. Third, psychopathy. Not the Hollywood version with masks and knives. We're talking about emotional blindness so complete, it's like they're missing a fundamental human sense. They can't feel your pain, your fear, your joy, and more terrifyingly, they can't feel their own remorse. They're impulsive, fearless, and ruthlessly pragmatic. While you're paralyzed by guilt over hurting someone's feelings, they're already 3 moves ahead, unburdened by the emotional weight that keeps the rest of us human. But here's what makes Paul Huss's discovery so brilliant and so disturbing. These aren't 3 separate problems. They share a common core that he identified: callous, manipulative, interpersonal style. Think of it as humanity's psychological Swiss Army knife. Grandiosity to command attention, strategic manipulation to get what you want, emotional detachment to avoid the costs. And here's the part that should terrify you. This combination doesn't just survive in our world, it thrives. While empathetic people get overwhelmed by others' emotions, while honest people get outmaneuvered by liars, while sensitive souls burn out from caring too much, the Dark Triad just keeps winning. You're probably thinking, surely these people pay a price? Surely their relationships suffer? Surely they're miserable inside? That's what we all want to believe. That's what keeps us sleeping at night. But what if that's just a comforting story we tell ourselves while they rise to the very top of every hierarchy we've ever built? So here's the question that haunted Paul Huss after his discovery. If these traits are so destructive, so toxic, so fundamentally wrong, why haven't they been bred out of existence? Think about it. We've been evolving for millions of years. Traits that hurt survival disappear. Traits that help survival stick around. So why do we still have psychological patterns that seem designed to destroy the very relationships and societies we need to thrive? The answer will fundamentally change how you see human nature itself. These traits aren't evolutionary mistakes. They're evolutionary solutions. But solutions to a world most of us have never experienced. Picture our ancestors 50,000 years ago. Resources are scarce. Threats are constant. Your tribe might be wiped out tomorrow by disease, famine, or warfare. In that world, the gentle, trusting, community-minded person dies. The narcissist who believes they deserve the best resources, they survive. The Machiavellian who can manipulate others into taking risks while they stay safe, they reproduce. The psychopath who feels no guilt about stealing food from the weak, their genes make it to the next generation. Researchers call this fast life history strategy. When tomorrow isn't guaranteed, you maximize short-term gains. You take what you can get, when you can get it, from whoever has it. Empathy becomes a luxury you literally can't afford. And here's what's truly unsettling. These strategies still work, not just in extreme survival situations, but in our modern world of corporate ladders, dating markets, and social hierarchies. Studies show individuals high in Dark Triad traits have more sexual partners, not because they're more attractive, but because they're willing to deceive, manipulate, and abandon without emotional cost. They climb organizational hierarchies faster because they're unburdened by guilt about stepping on colleagues. They accumulate resources more efficiently because they see every interaction as a transaction to optimize. But evolution doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't care about healthy relationships or thriving societies. It only cares about genetic survival. And sometimes, more often than we'd like to admit, being dark, being selfish, being manipulative, works. This means something profound about human nature. We're not fundamentally good people corrupted by bad environments. We're not fundamentally bad people saved by good environments. We're fundamentally complex people carrying both the capacity for extraordinary compassion and the genetic blueprint for calculated cruelty. Which raises the most disturbing question of all. In a world that still rewards these traits, in a society that celebrates the very behaviors that once helped our ancestors survive, who among us wouldn't be tempted to embrace our inner darkness? The pattern Paul has discovered isn't just about other people. It's about the shadow that lives inside all of us. Now we arrive at the heart of the paradox. If these evolutionary adaptations are so effective, where do we see them working best in our modern world? The answer is everywhere we look up. Research reveals a disturbing pattern. Individuals high in Dark Triad traits don't just succeed at gaining power, they excel at it in ways that would make Machiavelli himself proud. Think about the qualities we associate with great leaders. Confidence that borders on grandiosity, that's narcissism in action. Strategic thinking that treats people like chess pieces, pure Machiavellianism. The ability to make ruthless decisions without being paralyzed by guilt, textbook psychopathy. Studies show narcissists are more likely to emerge as leaders because they excel at impression management and self-promotion. While you're sitting quietly in meetings, worried about seeming arrogant, they're commanding the room with unshakable confidence. While you're considering everyone's feelings, they're making bold decisions that get results. Machiavellians climb organizational hierarchies faster because they see every interaction as a strategic opportunity. They form temporary alliances, manipulate information flow, and position themselves perfectly for advancement. They don't waste time on loyalty or genuine relationships. They invest in whatever serves their ascent. And psychopaths? They thrive in high-stakes environments because they lack the emotional interference that cripples the rest of us. No anxiety about consequences, no empathy slowing down tough decisions, no remorse clouding their judgment. This is why organizational researchers find higher concentrations of Dark Triad traits in leadership positions than in the general population. It's not a coincidence. It's a selection process. Our hierarchies don't just tolerate these traits, they reward them. But here's what makes this truly insidious. The very qualities that make someone effective at gaining power often make them terrible at wielding it responsibly. The narcissist's confidence becomes destructive grandiosity. The Machiavellian's strategic thinking becomes manipulative abuse. The psychopath's fearlessness becomes reckless disregard for consequences. Research on toxic leadership shows these individuals create environments where creativity dies, trust erodes, and talented people flee. They're excellent at climbing ladders, but they often burn down the building in the process. Employee demotivation, reduced innovation, increased turnover. The very organizations that elevated these leaders begin to collapse under their leadership, and yet they keep rising. Because by the time the damage becomes visible, they've already moved on to the next opportunity, leaving others to clean up the wreckage. This isn't a bug in our system, it's a feature. We've built hierarchies that systematically select for the very traits that ultimately destroy them, which means the charismatic leader you admire, the successful executive you aspire to become, the powerful figure you trust to make decisions that affect your life. They might be succeeding, not despite their darkness, but because of it. But what if this isn't just psychology? What if there's something fundamentally different about how these brains work? Something that makes them literally incapable of seeing the world the way you do? What if I told you that the behaviors we've been analyzing aren't just psychological preferences, they're written into the very architecture of the brain itself? When neuroscientists put individuals high in Dark Triad traits into MRI scanners, they discovered something that changes everything about how we understand these patterns. These aren't character flaws or moral failings. They're neurological differences so profound, it's like these people are experiencing a fundamentally different reality than you are. Research reveals that Dark Triad individuals show reduced grey matter volumes in brain regions crucial for social cognition, specifically the areas responsible for empathy and theory of mind. The anterior insula, which processes empathetic pain and emotional understanding, shows significantly less activity. The anterior cingulate cortex, essential for emotion regulation and moral decision-making, operates differently. Think about the last time you hurt someone's feelings. Remember that physical ache in your chest? That's your anterior insular firing, forcing you to literally feel their pain. Now imagine that system. Simply doesn't work the same way. For individuals with psychopathic traits, causing pain in others activates the same brain regions as watching someone solve a math problem. There's recognition, but no emotional resonance. No internal alarm system screaming, "Stop, you're hurting someone." Narcissists show heightened activity in reward processing regions when receiving admiration, but dramatically reduced activation in areas responsible for processing others' emotions. Their brains are literally wired to prioritize self-enhancement over social connection. Machiavellians display increased activity in brain networks involved in strategic thinking and long-term planning. The posterior cingulate cortex and angular gyrus that activate when we're analyzing social situations for advantage rather than connection. This isn't about being bad or good. These are fundamentally different operating systems running on human hardware. When they manipulate you, they're not overriding their empathy. They may genuinely lack the neural capacity to feel what you feel. When they exploit situations without guilt, it's not because they're choosing to ignore their conscience. Their brains might not generate that guilt signal in the first place. And here's what's truly unsettling. This neurological architecture might be exactly what makes them so effective in our competitive world. While your brain is constantly sending empathy signals that slow you down, theirs is optimized for rapid, self-interested decision-making. Which means when you're sitting across from someone high in these traits, whether it's your boss, your partner, or that charismatic leader you admire, you're not just dealing with different choices or values, you're dealing with a different species of consciousness altogether. But if these brains are so well adapted for success, why does every organization they touch eventually start to bleed talent and trust? What's the real price of this neurological advantage? Now comes the reckoning. If these neurologically optimized individuals are so effective at climbing hierarchies and gaining power, what happens to everyone else? What happens to the organizations, relationships, and societies they leave in their wake? The research reveals a devastation so systematic, so predictable, that it reads like a psychological epidemic. Studies tracking workplace dynamics show that organizations with high Dark Triad leadership experience employee turnover rates up to 300% higher than normal. Creativity plummets, innovation dies. The most talented people, the ones with options, flee first, leaving behind a hollow shell of what the organization once was. But it gets worse. Dark Triad traits are strongly linked to increased rates of violent delinquency, cybercrime, and interpersonal violence. Individuals high in these traits are statistically more likely to engage in psychological abuse, intimate partner violence, and bullying, both online and offline. Research shows they're the primary drivers of toxic work environments, workplace harassment, and the kind of manipulative behaviors that destroy team cohesion. While they're optimizing their personal outcomes, they're systematically undermining the social fabric that makes collaboration possible. And here's the truly insidious part. The costs are never borne by them. They're always externalized onto others. When a narcissistic leader burns through employees, they don't pay the emotional cost of broken careers and shattered confidence. When a Machiavellian executive manipulates their way to success, they don't suffer the trust deficit that poisons future relationships. When a psychopathic manager creates a culture of fear, they don't experience the anxiety and depression that drives their subordinates to therapy. The research on societal costs is staggering. Countries with higher prevalence of Dark Triad traits in leadership positions show increased corruption, reduced social trust, and weakened institutional integrity. The very qualities that help individuals succeed personally are corrosive to the collective systems we all depend on. Think about your own workplace. How many talented colleagues have left because of toxic management? How many promising relationships have you seen destroyed by someone who treated love like a strategic game? How many communities have been fractured by leaders who saw citizens as resources to exploit rather than people to serve? We've created a world where the most successful individuals are often the least capable of sustaining the systems that elevated them. They rise like parasites, brilliant at finding hosts, devastating at keeping them alive. But here's the question that should terrify you. If these traits are so destructive, so toxic, so obviously harmful to everyone around them, why do we keep rewarding them? Why do we keep falling for the charm, the confidence, the strategic brilliance? And more unsettling still, if we all carry the genetic capacity for these traits, if they emerge from the same evolutionary pressures that shaped all of us, what does that say about the darkness that might be sleeping inside you? Because the most dangerous part of understanding the Dark Triad isn't recognizing it in others. It's recognizing it in ourselves. So far, we've been talking about them. The toxic leaders, the manipulative partners, the destructive personalities wreaking havoc in our world. But now comes the moment of truth that changes everything. This isn't a story about other people. This is a story about us. Research reveals that Dark Triad traits exist on a spectrum, and we all fall somewhere on that continuum. Every single one of us carries the genetic capacity for narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. The question isn't whether you have these traits, it's how much and when they emerge. Think about the last time you posted something on social media, carefully crafting your image to get likes and validation. That's your narcissistic circuitry firing. The last time you told a strategic white lie to avoid conflict or gain advantage, there's your Machiavellian side. The last time you felt nothing while cutting someone off in traffic or ignoring a homeless person's plea for help, that's your psychopathic capacity for emotional detachment. This isn't about shame or self-condemnation. This is about recognition. Studies show that within the normal population, these traits serve adaptive functions. Healthy narcissism gives you confidence to pursue goals and believe in your abilities. Strategic thinking helps you navigate complex social situations. Emotional regulation prevents you from being overwhelmed by every tragedy you encounter. The research on subclinical levels of these traits reveals something profound. The difference between adaptive confidence and destructive grandiosity is often just a matter of degree and context. Between strategic thinking and manipulative exploitation, between emotional resilience and callous indifference. Modern culture doesn't just tolerate these traits, it actively rewards them. We celebrate the narcissistic confidence of entrepreneurs who believe they can change the world. We admire the Machiavellian strategy of leaders who outmaneuver their competitors. We respect the psychopathic fearlessness of soldiers, surgeons, and CEOs who make life and death decisions without emotional interference. But here's what's truly unsettling. The same traits that help you succeed in job interviews, dating, and social media might be the exact same traits that, taken to extremes, create the toxic leaders and destructive relationships we've been analyzing. Which means when you judge someone for their narcissism, you're judging an amplified version of your own self-promotion. When you criticize someone's manipulation, you're condemning a more extreme version of your own strategic thinking. When you're horrified by someone's callousness, you're reacting to your own capacity for emotional detachment taken too far. The Dark Triad isn't a pathology that affects other people. It's a fundamental part of human psychology that lives within all of us, waiting for the right circumstances, the right pressures, the right rewards to emerge. And in our digital age, where every platform rewards the very behaviors that feed these traits, what happens when technology begins to amplify the darkness that already exists within us all? Now we arrive at the most dangerous chapter of this story. Remember how we discovered that Dark Triad traits persist because they provide evolutionary advantages? Well, we've just created the perfect environment for those advantages to flourish beyond anything our ancestors could have imagined. Our digital world isn't just neutral technology. It's a dark triad amplifier operating at global scale. Studies reveal that social media platforms systematically reward narcissistic behavior. Every post is an opportunity for grandiose self-presentation. Every like feeds the validation hunger that drives narcissistic supply. The algorithms literally optimize for engagement, which means they optimize for the kind of attention-seeking, self-promotional content that narcissists excel at creating. Research shows individuals high in narcissism use more other punctuation, hashtags, @symbols, special characters, anything to stand out and command attention. They post more frequently about sex, achievement, and themselves, and the platforms reward this behavior with increased visibility and engagement. But narcissism is just the beginning. The digital world has created unprecedented opportunities for Machiavellian manipulation. Online, you can craft multiple personas, test different manipulation strategies, and exploit people without ever facing the immediate social consequences of deception. Research on cybercrime reveals that individuals high in Machiavellianism excel at stealth, deception, and long-term manipulation campaigns. They can build trust over months or years, gathering information and positioning themselves for maximum exploitation, all while hiding behind carefully curated digital identities. And psychopathy? The anonymous nature of digital interaction removes the last barriers to callous behavior. Studies show that dark triad traits, especially psychopathy, are strongly linked to cyberbullying, online trolling, and digital aggression. When you can't see your victim's face, when you can disappear into anonymity, when there are no immediate social consequences, the emotional detachment that defines psychopathy becomes a superpower. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. These platforms aren't just enabling people who are already high in dark triad traits. They're training all of us to think and behave more like them. Every time you carefully curate your image for maximum likes, you're practicing narcissistic self-presentation. Every time you strategically craft a message to manipulate someone's emotions, you're developing Machiavellian skills. Every time you feel nothing while destroying someone in the comments section, you're exercising psychopathic detachment. We've created a world where the most successful online behaviors are the same behaviors that, taken to extremes, create the toxic leaders and destructive relationships we fear. And this is where artificial intelligence becomes both our greatest threat and our potential salvation. AI can detect these patterns, predict these behaviors, and potentially intervene before damage occurs. But it can also amplify them, automate them, and scale them beyond human comprehension. The question isn't whether technology will change how these traits manifest in our world. The question is whether we'll develop the wisdom to manage this amplification before it manages us. After everything we've discovered, the evolutionary origins, the neurological differences, the devastating costs, the digital amplification, you might be wondering, are we doomed to repeat these patterns forever? Is there any hope for managing the darkness that lives within us all? The answer is a resounding yes, but only if we abandon our illusions and embrace a new understanding of what it means to be human. Research shows that awareness itself is the first line of defense. Studies on psychological assessment reveal that when individuals recognize dark triad traits in themselves, they become capable of conscious self-regulation. The brain's capacity for neuroplasticity means even deeply ingrained patterns can be modified through deliberate practice and environmental changes. Organizations are developing sophisticated screening methods to identify high-risk individuals before they gain destructive power. Multi-method assessments combining self-reports with behavioral observations and 360-degree feedback can detect manipulation and grandiosity that traditional interviews miss. Forward-thinking companies are implementing robust governance systems with regular leadership evaluations, psychological safety protocols for honest feedback, and clear performance expectations that prioritize collaboration over individual dominance. At the individual level, Research on emotional intelligence training shows promising results. Programs targeting empathy development, perspective taking, and emotional regulation can strengthen the neural pathways that counteract Dark Triad tendencies. Cognitive behavioral interventions help people recognize their own manipulative impulses and develop healthier relationship patterns. Mindfulness practices increase self-awareness and reduce the impulsivity that feeds destructive behaviors. We're developing AI systems that can analyze linguistic patterns, behavioral markers, and social media activity to identify Dark Triad expressions before they cause damage. Machine learning algorithms can detect manipulation attempts, predict toxic behavior, and even intervene with targeted interventions. But technology alone isn't enough. We need cultural change. We need to stop rewarding the very traits that destroy the systems we depend on. This means redefining success to include collaboration, empathy, and long-term thinking. It means creating reward systems that value the health of relationships and organizations over short-term individual gains. It means teaching emotional intelligence alongside technical skills and leadership ethics alongside strategic thinking. Most importantly, it means each of us taking responsibility for our own shadow. The narcissistic impulses that drive your social media posts, the Machiavellian calculations that shape your workplace behavior, the psychopathic detachment that lets you ignore others' suffering. Because here's what the research reveals that changes everything. When you understand these patterns, when you recognize them in yourself, when you make conscious choices about when to use these traits constructively versus destructively, you transform from being controlled by your evolutionary programming to being empowered by your psychological awareness. The question we began with, what makes someone successful, now has a completely different answer. Success isn't about eliminating these traits. It's about managing them consciously, using them ethically, and building systems that amplify their benefits while containing their costs. Which brings us back to that successful leader we started with, but now we see them with completely transformed eyes. Remember that successful person we started with? The one who commands every room, makes bold decisions, climbs every ladder with supernatural confidence? Now you see them completely differently. Those aren't just leadership qualities, they're evolutionary psychological tools that we all carry. Their success isn't despite having something dark inside them. It's because they're unconsciously wielding the same psychological arsenal that lives within you. The question was never, how do we identify dangerous people? The question is, how do we manage the dangerous aspects of ourselves? This changes everything about how you see success, leadership, and human nature itself. Every interaction, every workplace dynamic, every relationship now makes sense through this lens. The narcissistic confidence you admire, the strategic thinking you respect, the fearless decision-making you celebrate, you now know these live on a spectrum that includes manipulation, exploitation, and callousness. And this is just the beginning. How we parent, how we build organizations, how we design technology. Everything changes when you understand the psychological truth of human nature. So here's the question. Only you can answer now. When you look in the mirror tonight, which version of these traits will you choose to nurture? The ones that build or the ones that destroy? Because the most dangerous person isn't the one with these traits. It's the one who doesn't know they have them. If this journey has transformed how you see human nature, join the community of conscious observers who understand that wisdom begins with recognizing our own shadows. Every truth is a circle waiting to be completed.